Your alternative talk radio contact, The Planet, KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacence, people went to and fro of the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another edition of Into the Fray. First, if you enjoy ITF, please rate and review it in Apple Podcasts. This helps others find it, which turns into more people with encounters for me to interview. On the Trail of UFOs is available now. You can go to Amazon, Vimeo On Demand, or smalltownmonsters.com for DVDs and Blu-ray copies. I also have a special going to get you guys more content during this time allotted at home for most of us. I have a limited number of copies of Wood Knocks Volume 4 by David Weatherly, which of course I am a contributor to. They are ready to sign and send out to those who become a yearly member of ITF Insider. And of course, the moment you sign up, you will have instant access to all past and upcoming Insider episodes, which now I've actually started a stream of live video, especially for insiders to join in with me. Also, Beyond the Fray Bigfoot, the Kindle edition, is on sale for 99 cents. Head to Amazon.com to purchase. This deal will run through March 26th. As far as Beyond the Fray publishing goes, G. Michael Hoff and I are very proud to announce our first offering, and that would be Ken Gerhard's The Essential Guide to Bigfoot in Kindle edition. So head to Amazon.com right now to download and consume today. And last but not least, there are 2 different Kickstarters running right now in which I fully support the folks pitching these projects. First, as mentioned on episode 229, Derek Hayes of the Monsters Among Us podcast and David Flora of Blurry Photos are looking to put together a documentary all about the high strangeness in the Borrego State Park in California. And actually at this point, they only need a few $1,000s more to make that happen. And trust us, every little bit helps. So go to Kickstarter.com and search Borrego Triangle. That is Borrego. And also, author Luke Phillips. You've heard him on ITF episode 92, talking about cryptid cats, the lions of Tsavo, Bigfoot, and even his own big cat sighting. Well, he's got 2 books already out, one titled Shadow Beast and the other The Daughters of the Darkness. These are fiction based on fact, and he's actually looking to release the 3rd, which is titled Phantom Beast. His goal on Kickstarter to release the 3rd book is $920. He is already $300 in. So he's looking for some help to get this 3rd book produced. Again, head to Kickstarter and search either Luke Phillips or Phantom Beast. And probably the easiest way to find all of the links that I just mentioned, just head to intothefrayradio.com, click on this episode, and all of the links will be right there in the show notes for you. Oh yeah, no, Roy. I mean, wherever you want to start, because I know that, like I was saying, you gave me a perfect segue because you did bring up the fact that you do have family history. So it's not just, it didn't really start with you, but you have had experiences your whole life, right?
Yeah, it's my whole life. The earliest thing I remember is getting in trouble as a child. I mean, like before 5, about saying things to people that they didn't want to tell anybody. Like I would know things I wasn't supposed to know. And I say getting in trouble, but it wasn't really, no, that's bad. It was, don't talk about things. My mother took me to the side and said, don't talk about things people might not want to talk about, not want other people to know.
Right.
And I had stories. My mother growing up, she saw a shadow, kind of a multicolored shadow standing in her doorway when she was young. And when she called for mother came, and instead of telling her that there wasn't anything there, she told her it couldn't get her. Of course, and when I told my parents there were things in the dark, that's what they told me. I get so upset when I hear people tell their kids, oh, it's just your imagination. Oh, there's nothing there. No, there is stuff out there. The dark has things in it. And I hear, even as a young child, I remember going into rooms and hearing conversation. And it's like you're at a party and you can't really make out what anybody's saying. You can just tell people are talking.
Right.
And of course, I'm sorry, to go back to the thing with the multicolored.
Yeah, no problem.
That, I'm saying a multicolored shadow, it had like bits of lightning going through that were multicolored. And my great grandmother, one of my mother's grandmothers, she was from here in Arkansas. Of course, both sets of grandparents and family are from this area, Arkansas and Oklahoma. My father's family is from Oklahoma, Texas, and my mother's is from Arkansas, Oklahoma area. And one of the grandmothers, and I can't remember which one, I asked Mom like a week or two ago, and I can't remember which one it is, but one of hers was, she bought warts. People would, from even back here in Arkansas, would send her a penny, and she would buy the wart, and the warts would go away. And this was something that my mother remembers her doing. And the same grandmother, she could take a plant and go and throw it on the ground and water it, and it would grow. This woman had a green thumb, like crazy green thumb. And she would get upset with Mom, and Mom would get aggravated at her because she'd give her cuttings of plants. Mm-hmm. And Mom can't keep a plastic plant alive.
That's, yeah.
And no, you just do this. You just throw it down and give it water and it grows. No, Grandma, that's not what it does.
She's like, not for me.
And it's been, find out that strange stuff is happening on both sides. My grandmother, my mother's mother, she saw a UFO over Mount Shasta. Her and a group of friends saw a UFO over Mount Shasta back, I'm going to say, in the late 50s, early 60s. And it's just, you get stories like that handed down, people talking about things. And I didn't realize until I was much older and gained a interest in the paranormal and magic, that my family has a tradition of wise women in it. One of the things that I know is genetic for me, and this goes to more like extraordinary abilities. And this is one of the ones where I've told people this, and they look at you like you've grown a tentacle out of your head. And I don't want to say immune, but electricity has very little effect on me. I can stick my finger in a light socket and it just tingles a little bit.
Wow.
And I've had this for a long time. My earliest memory of that is I was a teenager and I had taken a lamp apart to rewire it and plugged it in to check the connection, and then forgot to unplug it and reached over and grabbed the end of the live wire. And I just went, what in the world? Oh, it's on. It's plugged in still, and unplug it. I had my same side of the family that, and this is not the wise woman. This is another branch of it. My grandmother, my mother's mother, could not wear watches because they would leave burn marks on the back of her hand and stop. A battery-powered watch would eventually stop. And I have the same problem. I have the same problem with electric, or for a long time, until I learned how to shield myself a little bit.
Now, what about, Roy, have you heard of people that they call them sliders, where they'll walk underneath like a lamppost or something, and it will go out, and then they'll walk away, and that one will come on, and then the next one will go out that they go under?
See, I have the opposite thing. I have lights like that will go on. If it's off, I'll have it flicker. Like I'll set off, if I'm having a bad day, I'll set off the alarms at Walmart walking through the pylons.
Really?
Yeah.
You're like looking at the Walmart guy like, I swear to God, I don't have anything on me. But how do you explain something like that to them, right?
But you just, at some point, you just go, yeah, okay, scan me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I set off metal detectors. Every metal detector I go through, I set it off. It goes beep. I have gone through nearly naked, t-shirt, flip-flops, gym shorts, and it goes beep.
Wow.
And they go, you got to come here. And it's just, I try to get them to just use the wand. Use the wand, and I don't have anything. No, you got to go through the metal detector first.
Oh.
And I got where I was wearing wind-up pocket watches as a teenager because I wanted to watch, and they would warp. The gears would warp if I wore them after a year or two. The gears would warp on them. And I've been hit by lightning 4 times.
What?
Yeah, that's the one. Some people don't believe me on that, but I think I have some friends that don't believe me, but they won't sit next to me when it's storming outside. And this was in less than a year span that I got hit by lightning 4 times.
Holy crap, Roy.
I was working construction, so we were outside. I'd have to go back and forth and be outside. The first one really freaked me out because I didn't know what had happened. I'm in the back of one of those utility trailers, and I leaned out, and I have a wrench in my hand, and I lean out and have it in the air, and I holler at the guy and say, "Is this the one you want?" And before I can finish the sentence, everything goes white, and all I hear is "wee," and I just freeze because I don't know what happened. And I feel hands grab me and drag me in, and the guys I worked with were freaked completely out. And the wrench to above where my hand was mangled.
Oh my
It had
gosh.
warped. And it blew the toe of my boot off. And I was mad. I tell people I was mad about that because it was a brand new pair of boots.
Of course, right?
And if it had blown my foot off with it, I wouldn't have needed the boot anymore. But I had to tape it up with duct tape and finish the rest of the day. And it took probably about 30 minutes before I could actually see anything again.
God.
And it was just nothing. It was sound. It was just that when everything's real quiet and you just hear that ringing.
Right. I mean, you didn't want to go to the hospital, or the guys that you were working with were like, Roy, did you want to, have to call the ambulance or something?
I told them that it was fine. After I figured out what had happened, I'm like, no, I'm fine.
Holy
and the second time, I kind of knew what was going to happen, but I figured that I would be okay because there was light poles. I was in a parking lot of a mall, and there was light poles that were taller than I was, and I figured, okay, it'll hit, okay, I feel it. I could feel the electricity in the air, and I went, okay, I'll be fine. No, it chooses to hit me instead of the light poles. There's 4 light poles around me, and it goes straight to the top of my head. And the other 2 times it arced off of something else that it hit. One, it hit a car and arced over and went to the ground through me. And the other time it hit a building that had lightning rods on it. And about halfway down, instead of going down through the copper wire to the ground, it arcs over and hits me. And like I said, the first time was crazy for me because I was freaked completely out because everything's just white for 30 minutes and all you hear is that noise, that ringing noise. And after that, it just, oh yeah, okay, whatever.
I mean, so that happened 4 times in less than a year. How long ago was that?
Oh, that was, I'd say that was almost 10 years ago. That was right before I went to Florida.
So besides that, you haven't really had any more experiences being hit by lightning?
No, I don't go outside in storms anymore.
Yeah.
I don't go outside in storms unless I absolutely have to.
Man. Well, I mean, after 4 times, I suppose it's good. You learned that lesson, especially after that first time. That would be terrifying. I mean, didn't you sit there kind of going, is my sight going to come back? Like, is my hearing going to come back?
Well, like I said, for the longest time, I just assumed I was dead. For the first few seconds, it was like, okay, I'm dead. This is what dead is.
Right.
This is the transition period between being alive and dead. But until the guys grabbed me, and I actually had to apologize because I hit one guy. Because because they didn't know what had happened. They saw the lightning hit, and I'm just standing there frozen.
Right.
And they come over and grab a hold of me, and I hit one of the guy upside the head with the wrench. Because I didn't just feel you just feel hands grab you, and you're like, no. I assumed, oh, okay, it's demons. I'm dead, and I'm going. But,
they're dragging me down.
And that's when I had done weird electrical stuff all my life throughout my teenage years. I freaked my 9th grade science teacher out because she had one of those static generators.
Mm-hmm.
And I could grab onto the static generator and arcs off to stuff. If I grabbed with my left hand, I could use my right hand and shoot arcs of lightning off onto stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
I've always been overcharged, even like on a tile floor. I will generate static electricity and shock somebody if I touch them. I've had it arc off to metal objects like doorknobs and everything, and it's not like a little bit of electricity. There's an audible pop, and you can see the arc.
Has that diminished at all since as you age, or is it still just as strong as it ever was?
No, all of that is still just as strong as it ever was. A couple months ago, I was working on my house, and I thought I had turned the breaker off for the power. And I reached down to hook up the outlet that I was putting in, and I grabbed a hold of it and went, nope, that's still live. I'm already down here on the floor. I might as well just put it on. And it doesn't, I hadn't done anything, so there was a part of my brain that went, I wonder if that's gone. And then I'm like, nope, still there. That's just one of I have crazy night vision. Absolutely no depth perception. None whatsoever. No depth perception. Crazy night vision.
Really?
On a full moon, I can see what a normal person can see in the light of day. It's bright. I wear sunglasses quite often when I remember to pick them up.
So because daylight is that much brighter to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fluorescent lights give me a headache. I love the new LED lights because they're new LED house lights.
Yeah.
Because they about the same light frequencies as the old incandescent ones. If you get the one kind, and I can't remember if it's the white or the daylight, but that's the ones I always get because the light is more yellow.
I mean, what about when you're, in your own home, like watching TV or something like that? Or, I wonder, because in the beginning when we first hopped on, you said, hey, I'm in a rural area. I don't know how good my connection is going to be, and I'm probably jinxing it by saying this, but it's actually gotten better as the call has gone on. So that's kind of interesting what you're talking about right now, because I just wonder how much you're actually, affecting everything around you.
Well, see, I do affect things, and that goes in more into the magic stuff. Some of it, like I can, and this is going to sound, I mean, it's not any crazier than any of the other stuff we've talked about. Like if I'm wanting to listen to a station, a radio station, I'm driving, I can make it come in stronger to finish the song.
So it basically turning the volume up, or just your how does that work? That's so cool.
It's not necessarily the volume, the signal. I can somehow strengthen the signal.
Right.
And I don't know, it's one of those where, oh, that's annoying. I want that, and I did something and it got stronger and I went, oh, I wonder if that'll work again. And I did it again and again. And I've done this in front of people. It's not like I'm just nuts.
That is so
and
cool.
And this stuff is happening when I'm not, when I'm alone.
And you can diminish a signal as well?
I've never actually tried that. Because it's more necessity thing. I'm like, oh, I want to listen to that song. I want to finish the end of that song. I like that song. And before it gets out of range, no, you're going to get stronger. At least finish that song. So with stuff like that.
You mentioned that you have wise women in your family. So what kinds of things, besides the warts and the pennies and stuff like that, what kinds of things were they practicing?
Well, there was a lot of mountain medicine, herbs and stuff like that. And unfortunately, my mother was not in a place to ask about and get the traditions passed down to her, mostly because her mother also wasn't. Her mother wanted to be I think, I get the feeling from her stories that she wanted to be a city woman. She wanted to integrate into California and be away from a lot of that stuff. And it's gone. I don't know. There's just a couple stories, the plants, the being good with plants, buying the warts, people calling her for advice. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of the old everyday magic in the world. Because at some point there was a disconnect. Somebody died and didn't get it all passed over. Some kid didn't want to do that. Oh, it's just old mountain superstitions.
Right.
And it's gone. And I'm having the analogy I give people is that I read a book about fire and have no earthly idea what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to make a fire from a really obscure book that they assumed everybody knew what fire was.
Except you can open your hands and then create fire. You're like, I give you fire. Well, and then there it is,
Some things, yeah. But there are other things that it feels like it's right there. And if I just knew how to grab a hold of it, I could get it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just right out of my reach. And every once in a while I get something. Every once in a while something happens and I go, oh, that worked. And this is one of those things I haven't done in years just because there was no need for it. I used to be able to, when I was right out of high school, about 15 years ago, I could stick a quarter to the wall and walk away from it. And it would stay there for 2 or 3 minutes.
And people are watching you probably going, oh, well, let me try that. And then they walk up and it slides right down the wall, of course, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I discovered I could do. And I used to call it rooting. I could root something.
Could you do it with something larger?
Well, yes. I started out with books. You throw a book up on the dashboard of the car,
mm-hmm.
and it slides across the thing, and I would, at one point, I got annoyed by it, and I went, stay, pointed my finger at it, and go, stay there, and it stays there. Of course, we live in rural Arkansas, and they laid down a snake and paved the road that way,
right?
And so it was, and my mother just looked at me weird because it didn't move. And it was just, at that point, it was just one more weird thing. Yeah. And you don't really think about how weird your life is until you leave where you lived as a child.
Right. Do you remember the first time that, and maybe you just said it just out of frustration, but a situation like that where something was moving and you're like, just stay there. And then it did it and you're like, oh, I guess I can do that too. Do you remember the first time that ever happened to you?
Well, yeah. I had thrown, and I think it was Dune. I think it was one of Frank Herbert's Dune books.
Mm-hmm. Very large book, thick, and yeah.
And I'd phoned it up on getting in. You throw it up on the dashboard, of course. In the seatbelt, you can't reach up and grab it. And I got tired of it sliding back and forth, and just pointed my finger at it and go, stay there, and it did. And you kind of
mm-hmm.
go, oh, well, and it just progressed to that, and I got to the point where I could stick a quarter to the wall and walk away from it. And the one that really stuck out to me, I was working at Walmart back in the receiving area, and they had some people back there that shouldn't have been back there. They were small, and I'm a big old dude. I've ever since I've been 16, I have not gone below 200 pounds. They were pulling a pallet, and it got away from them, and I saw it and ran up and put my hand in the middle of it, and it stopped immediately.
Like a pallet probably loaded full of a lot of heavy stuff that could have killed somebody.
Yeah. This was probably 300-400 pounds of groceries, canned goods and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it stopped. And, that stuff's not wrapped real good. Usually it would take it, and it'd push you. Even somebody who was as large as I was, it would push you.
Right.
But in that moment of, this is one of the things I tell people, a lot of my magic that I do is by need. I needed that, so it worked. And there's a few tricks and stuff I can do when it's not, when I want to just have fun.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get drinks in bars in Texas by changing my eye color.
Whoa, wait, what?
Yeah, I could change my eye color from a really bright blue to silver. And now it's stuck in between. It's a silvery blue now.
So you can't do the change anymore?
No, I think at one point I just stopped doing it, and it got stuck in between at some point, and I haven't really. It's one of those where I haven't really tried in years, because I don't have anybody to impress, because, like I said, I'm pretty much a hermit now. But I've seen things, I've done things that are nuts. I performed my first exorcism when I was in high school.
Now, how did you know how to do that?
I didn't. It's one of those. This is another thing that has been weird with me. For a lot of times, I have done things and picked things up and went, I have never done this. I'm going to do this. And whoops, I know how to do it.
So how did you fall into that particular situation, being in a room and performing an exorcism?
And this is weird. And it just, the whole statement of it is weird. But I'm a very warm person. I actually run a couple of degrees hotter than a normal person, around 98, between 98 and 99. So I'm almost never cold. It takes pervasive cold for me to actually be cold.
Mm.
And I walked into our high school cafeteria, and I think it was my junior year. And I just feel all the heat suck out of me. Like you hit a wall, you walk into a freezer and all of a sudden you're cold. And I kind of went, what's going on? And one of my friends came up, and I'm not worried about telling this story because I'm not really in contact with any of these people anymore. One of my friends came up and goes, something's happening to my boyfriend. And one of the people that she had been hanging out with comes up behind her and tries to tell me to go. And I kind of look at her weird, and her eyes move up to behind me, and she turns pale white and leaves. She says to this day that she doesn't remember any of that year, which I don't doubt if she was being manipulated somehow. I walk over to him, and he's hunched over in his chair, just shaking. And of course, we're in the middle of the cafeteria at this point, and nobody's paying attention to this. And she has a little bottle of olive oil that some places give out for anointing oil. And I take and put a couple drops on his head and begin praying. And as I'm praying, I notice that this olive oil is running down his head and over his body and pooling on the floor. And I'm like, there's not enough oil in this bottle to have done this. Because it's like one of those little bitty, probably like 30 ml bottles.
Right.
And I kind of go, okay, that's weird, and continue. And basically it was prayer. It was telling it to leave. And that's when I learned I had done it wrong. It leaves him. And I'm sitting there, I've gone to get my lunch. I'm sitting there eating. And I feel talons go into my shoulders. Like this giant bird has just grabbed a hold of me. And all I can think of is give me a Bible. And I start reading out loud. One of my friends happened to have a Bible right there on the table. And I began reading out loud and eventually get to a part and go, and it comes into my head, tell it to go away and not come back. And that's what I did. And the pain eased and everything was okay. And it was just, he has no memory of that. His personality changed after that. He was meaner. He was sharper. Things annoyed him more. And he actually eventually became abusive to his wife. But I don't know if that was just the trauma from that or something. I have no way of knowing whether that was just a trigger for him or if something did something to him.
Right.
And that's weird. It's one of those things that's just weird. And things have, I've told people this stuff drops in my lap. I'm just walking down the street and boom, there's something going on. I've walked into places like bars or a restaurant and gone in and sat down, and I'm not talking about anything paranormal. And then there wasn't anything paranormal being talked about when I come in, but after a few minutes, people are talking about paranormal stuff. And I mean, how do you quantify that?
Right.
How do you know? Am I leaking? You know,
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's my brain. You know, are my brain waves leaking? Am I changing reality around me? And there's just other stuff with like precognition. And this is I know this is a touchy subject for a lot of people, and I'm going to explain something I've not heard anybody ever explain. And because you get, well, why don't you go get a lottery ticket? Why don't you do this? Why don't you buy stocks? Well, for one thing, do you know how many possibilities there are with those things?
Mm-hmm.
You can't just go, well, zoom in on it and that's it. The way I've described it, it's looking, the past is a beam of light on a prism, and the future is all of the colors on the other side. And the only thing you can do to predict things is go, well, these are happening more, this thing is happening more often in more paths. But also at the same time, this is where metaphors get muddy. It's a path, it's multiple, the future is multiple paths in a forest, and sometimes they all meet in certain clearings. Mm. And that's a lot of those, there's a lot of metaphysical mumbo jumbo that I've heard a lot of people say. And it's just, a lot of times I tell people it's just better not to explain it. But if you're looking at your own future, if I look at somebody else's future and go, hey, you might want to do this. If they do it, okay. If they don't, all right. If I start looking at my future and I start doing things that I saw in my future, you start getting to the point where, am I doing this because I chose to do it, or am I doing it because I saw it?
Right.
And you go nuts. You go completely nuts.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
Your reality messes up.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of precogs don't, you know, they don't do that. They don't read their own cards. They don't read their own tea leaves. They don't look at the crystal ball for themselves, and they're in a shack down by the river underneath a bridge.
Right.
Now I get little stuff like something, I'll feel a compulsion to move my glass off of a table, and then like a couple minutes later somebody crashes through the table, and I go, you know, I wish I could do that on command, you know. And it's little stuff like that, and that's only an example. It happens on and off all the time to me. Like I'll move something, or, you know, I'll move the car. One time I remember I went out and I moved the car back, and in the night we had a storm and a tree fell, and if I had to move the car had been crushed. It's just weird, crazy, random stuff like that.
Right.
And it's one of those where, you know, like I said, I wish I could do it on command, but it's just not there.
You also brought up something that, if it's okay with you to switch gears to, and that is the word vampire.
Yeah.
You probably figured that I definitely want to cover that, right? I mean, that I was like, yes, vampires, let's do this.
Here's the thing. What kind of vampire do you mean?
I mean, I've heard of all kinds. I've heard of the sanguinist. I've heard of energy vampires, you know. Of course, some people think that the other kind are real. They don't really sparkle in the sun. But actually, there was one of my episodes, Robert, 158, and this, I think, is the only one that I remember the number for. And people actually heard an EVP within the recording, and it was like a man whispering, vampire. And it was very I didn't hear it till after, until somebody emailed me. But this person had all kinds of strange abilities. He could change his face depending on who was looking at him. He had no need for a wallet or money or any of this stuff. He kind of just crashed this spring break party that these kids were having. Yeah. And he was just an odd fellow. He didn't sleep and, you know, some of the classic vampire stuff, but other stuff that I had never heard of before.
See, part of that to me sounds like a glamour, an illusion that you...
More like a fae kind of a thing?
Well, it's not just fae that do it. It's in the old stories. I came at this a different way than a lot of people listening to these podcasts and these people that are ghost hunters. I came from it. I read the Arthurian legends as a child, the Welsh ones, not the French and English versions, because that's weird. That guy had some problems.
Yeah.
And you get stories of these things happening, and you go, well, that's what that is. It's stuff like aliens and black-eyed kids and some of the Bigfoot and cryptid descriptions where people go, I don't know what this is. And you go, anybody that has ever read any fairy story goes, I know exactly what that is.
Right.
Because it matches their MO perfectly. The Black-Eyed Kids is one that is, for me, is so much the exact MO of the old fairy stories that it's creepy.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally get on board with that. The second you start talking about any fae stuff, it touches on so many points of things that we talk about, missing 411 and aliens and, like you said, black-eyed kids and some vampire stuff. So they definitely have a wide-reaching blanket at some points.
They all follow, like vampires, the vampire stories, they follow those same rules. Fairies follow those same rules. Demons sometimes follow those same rules. And other supernatural entities follow those same rules. Where fairies are slippery is if they mean you harm in some way, they can't come into your house. But if they're just there, there's nothing, they can go in and out. That's why you get I remember one story, and I can't remember if it was on Darkness Radio or their later podcast, that they talked about a couple, them getting in and surviving it. That was one of those where they had some health problems afterwards, but you get that in a lot of the fairy stories where things didn't go right after that.
Right.
The stories of the Pukas in Ireland, where the kitchen maid decided not to give them the buttermilk and the fresh bread, gave them a crust and sour milk, and they tore the farm apart.
So what kind of vampires are you talking about then?
Well, see, that's one of those weird things where you have to have a little bit of take some stuff on my word, and I know that's hard. Being involved in the demonology stuff, and I'll use that term because I'm by no means an ordained exorcist. There's a difference between willing possession and a forced possession, and you don't get that a lot in the Catholic mysticism, because they deal mostly with forced possessions, where they badgered the person down so much. But you have your sanguinists, where they may be have some type of special anatomy like myself, and they're able to not just draw sustenance but energy from the blood, from the life blood. because blood in a lot of the old stories is powerful. Just anybody's blood, just anything's blood is powerful. But most of them are mostly harmless. You're not going to get, every once in a while you get one that's really bad and doing stuff they shouldn't do. But a lot of times the sanguineous community will put a kibosh on that themselves.
So have you had any experience with a vampire at all?
I had a girlfriend who was a psychic vampire for a long time. I've met other people who were psychic vampires. Mm-hmm. There are also entities that non-corporeal entities that are psychic vampires. Of course, we like to throw that word around in popular culture for just about everything. Demon is almost the same way. And I have actually met sanguinists in New Orleans. I've met werewolves in New Orleans. Met a guy that claimed to be 200 years old. That was interesting.
Back up to the werewolf. Can you cover that one real quick?
Well, that was the guy.
Okay, all right.
200 years old, and dude is normal-looking guy. I mean, he's a little bit more buff. Of course, it's New Orleans, so the fact that he was dressed like a biker is not that big a deal.
So what happened? He came up and you started talking. He came out with this information?
Well, see, I was looking for things at that point in my life. And this is going to be weird, and I know it's weird, and I have no proof for it, but I am / believe myself to be a were-being. I'm not a werewolf. I'm a were-bear. If you look at the old stories, there are 3 classes of were-beings. There's wolves, cats, and bears. And I think I'm one of those. When I was younger, I was looking for things and asking questions that I probably shouldn't have been asking. And he basically came up to me and said, dude, you got to quit doing that. Somebody's gonna take notice. And
because he could see you changing a little bit?
Well, see, no, I don't. I have never changed. I have never, and that is something I did myself. When I was 21, something happened to me, and I think I almost changed then. A block of some kind was taken off of me that I think was put on as a child. But I did something to myself. I've told people I tied my chakras in knots to stop that from happening.
Because it scared you pretty bad?
Well, it did. It scared me very, very much. And once I started figuring out what was going on, I thought I was a monster for a long time. That made me a monster.
So, Roy, what makes you think that you are a were-bear versus one of these other were-beings that you brought up?
See, I have had dreams where I have shifted. And the composition, I don't think our history, from what I've looked at, the history of the world is not what we think it is. And that's a blanket statement, and it's one of those things where it's just bits and pieces of stuff that have leaked through, bits and pieces of magic and everything else. But the circumstances, and I've actually had people, I thought I was a werewolf for a long time. And circumstances and talking to people, other people like myself, or cousins, werewolves. I've actually, like I said, I met werewolves, and he was one of the people that said, dude, you're not a werewolf. You're something else. I have never been able to find, there's supposedly communities of werebears in the far north, Alaska, Canada, the Dakotas, but I've never taken the time or money to walk out into the tundra and on the off chance that I'm going to find somebody.
Now, this man in New Orleans, just to take it back to the basics, this man says that, and, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you also, if you're quote unquote, you tied your chakras in knots to keep this from happening. If that wasn't the case, you could then choose to turn from a man into a beast.
Into a very large bear. And this is, on my part, is partly speculation from dreams. In my dreams, I always, if something like that happens, I always change into a very large golden bear. And
do you still have human thoughts while you're a bear? Do you know that you've changed, or are you just 100% bear? Yes and no.
See, and this is one of those where either I'm crazy or I'm right. I think there are two aspects of this psyche, at least on my part. There is the thing that the voice I've called hide, and I think there's a transition period, a transition in between fully human and fully bear, where you get bigger, you can get claws, but you're basically human shaped still. And I've started calling this thing in my head hide, because it's darker. It's a little more animalistic, where I'd rather talk to somebody than fight them. This personality, and I hate to say personality, because then I sound schizophrenic. This other voice wants to fight them. And it is very much the depiction between Jekyll and Hyde. It's the more bestial nature of of humanity. And it's harder. It's more vicious. It's not necessarily evil. It just is what it is. It's more your survival drive.
Mm.
And then there's the beast. And I was calling it before the M. Night Shyamalan movie, I swear. I watched that probably earlier in the year and went, oh crap, this is going to get a lot harder to find.
Right.
Because they're going to think I'm talking about this movie. But that aspect in the form of, and in my dreams, and I can actually kind of feel it in the back of my brain all the time, is all beast. And when you're in that form, and I've talked to some other people that have corroborated this feeling. Of course, we all could be crazy, so there's always that. That feeling is always is stronger when you're in the animal form. And if you let it can take over.
Like you would stay permanently that form, that shape, the beast.
Yes. And you'd cease to be human. You might dream that you're human every once in a while. Mm. And that was, for a long time, I think that was one of the things I was afraid of. And
Roy, this man in New Orleans, the werewolf, how often would he change? Like fully into the werewolf shape? Did you guys talk about little details like that?
Not really.
So like things like what he would do when he changed, or, you didn't really cover any of that stuff with him?
Well, some of the things, like he would he'd go out and he said, if he's feeling froggy, he would go out into the swamp, and you run. And one of the things he would tell you, you want to eat something. You want to eat a big meal before you do that, or you're going to come out and you're going to be coughing up deer guts for a week. I know that sounds nasty, but that's what he said.
I mean, that's exactly though what would happen in the movie The Wolf, right? Or wait, is that the name of the movie with Anthony Hopkins and Oh my gosh, I can see his face, and I love
Yeah,
him.
I know the one you're talking. That was actually pretty good.
It was, yeah.
Um,
But he would go out, and when he was in this werewolf form, he would, kill and run and do all these things, and then he'd wake up in the morning and go, "Oh crap, I changed again." And he wouldn't quite, though, be able to control any of that when he was in that shape, right?
See, here's where you get into some more weird stuff with that. You have your hereditary shifters, which is what I believe I am. That's what he was. They have a control over it, at least after the first few times. When you're young, it happens. The full moon has an effect on people. Like I know when there's a full moon, I can feel it, and I feel really amped up, or I'm sick. I mean, I'm bad sick on a full moon. And it's just that night, the 3 nights of the full moon, and then it's gone. It's not like I caught a stomach bug. I'm achy. I don't. I've got a headache. Things like that. I hurt everywhere. My joints hurt, and it's one or the other. I'm either really amped up and I feel great. I mean, the highest high you could ever have, or you just feel like crap.
Now, how easy would it be for you to unleash that side and go ahead and unfurl your chakras so that you could just go ahead and grab onto that again?
Well, see, the problem is I don't know what I did. And now that I have come to grips with myself, I don't know how to, I really don't know what to do to undo it. I think at some point I'll be able to. I'll figure it out. I actually had an elderly Chinese lady come up to me one time and go, "Oh, your chakras are all messed up. Let me fix that." And she starts to do something, and I go, "No, no, no, no. If you can see that, look deeper." And she looked deeper and went, "Oh, okay, never mind. Bye."
Oh God.
I mean, that was her. She was gone, and I think she could see what was underneath that. And I've had weird experiences with people. Like, I have trouble getting people to read tarot cards for me. They either just straight up refuse, or I get weird faces the entire time, and I'm pretty sure they're not telling me what they're actually seeing.
Mm.
Yeah, because you don't want to tell weird stuff to somebody. But I've had people. I've walked into places that had a psychic sign up, walked in and went, "No, no, we're closed. Bye." Yeah.
Right, like what are they really seeing or sensing?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not, without, pinning somebody down and going, "Hey," and shaking them until they tell me. I have no earthly idea.
How many of these hereditary shifters, as you referred to them, how many of those do you think there are? Just take the U.S. I mean, if you could guess. Or is this a rampant thing, or is this very few and far between?
See, there are a lot more werewolves than there are anything else. I also think there's some partials, and that's a weird term, but they're people who probably several generations ago, one of their ancestors was a shifter, a protean, whatever you want to call them. Were people is really a weird thing to say because you're saying man people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I like protean, just myself. I went shifter for a long time and I didn't really like it. But protean is the thing that I really like. Talking about Proteus from Homer's Odysseys.
Mm-hmm.
But they had an ancestor at some time, and at some point, one of their descendants is going to end up being that. I think that's what happened to me. Because my parents are not... I think my parents both have it, and that's why I have it stronger. I have whatever gene makeup, and I actually think it's somewhere in the junk DNA that that geneticists talk about. And there's switches that get flipped.
So, Roy, what about What about dogman sightings? Or is there an actual, being a dogman, an actual flesh and blood creature that was born a dogman, is a dogman, and will die a dogman? Or is that, in fact, some of these shapeshifters?
I don't think those are shapeshifters. I've seen one. Saw one in New Orleans in the middle of a hurricane.
Please continue on that story. I'm not going to let you get off the hook with that one.
My dumbass, I don't know if I can say that, is
yes,
out.
You may.
I'm recently free, recently traveling, just left home. I'm 21. And I tell you, I can't remember if this happened before or after the thing that I think I've come unblocked. But I'm standing out in a hurricane because, I'm an Arkansas boy. I've never seen a hurricane. And I'm out in the middle of this hurricane and we're working. And I can't tell you what hurricane it was. It was around 2008, 2009. It was one of the minor ones. What you can call a minor hurricane, and everything, they hadn't mandatory evacuated. We were working. I go outside on one of my breaks and I'm watching debris fly past me. It's like I'm standing in the middle of the tornado in the Wizard of Oz. There's a house, and I'm probably 30, 40 feet from the corner of this building. And this thing walks out on all fours. And I kind of go, well, that's a weird looking dog. And then it looks at me and I go, that's not a dog. And the damn thing stands up on its hind legs and roars at me. Well, I'm just kind of sitting there going, and just kind of shocked for a second or two. And in the back of my head, I hear, if you run, you're dead. Well, the only thing I could think about was I put my hands above my head. Of course, I've got a framing hammer in my hand. So I knew what I was going to do if it came at me. I just didn't know if it was going to work.
Right.
But I put my hands above my head and I roar back at it. And I basically pulled the cat trick and go, I'm big. I'm big. You see how big I am? And it kind of rocks back a little bit and tilts its head, like a dog does when hearing a sound it doesn't know what it is. It tilts its head one way and tilts its head the other way, and then huffs. Snorts out. You've heard dogs, do that snort.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's kind of they're blowing through their jowls and their nose at the same time, and it just drops back on all fours and turns around, walks back around the corner. I then proceeded to freak completely out and go back in, and I was white. Dude's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, no, I'm not talking about it. Just, no. And it took me a long time to get where I would talk about it because nobody's going to believe I saw this in the middle of New Orleans during a hurricane. And then I'm listening to the Dogman stories on your podcast. I'm listening to the stories from Dark Waters on Coast to Coast on Darkness Radio, and going, well, what did I do different? Oh, I didn't run. Every one of those people say, I ran back in the house. I ran into the car. I ran around the corner. The only other one I've heard that did not run is the woman that you interviewed, and it left her alone.
Right. She ignored it as best she could, and it just kind of kept on walking.
You didn't act like prey. Right. Dogs will do that. Like if you an aggressive dog and it's coming at you, if you run at it, it will go, whoa, wait a minute, that's not what's supposed to happen.
Now, what kind of other details could you glean from it? Did it have the backwards second joint in the leg? How tall would you guess it was standing? What did the head look like on the thing?
Well, it looked like when it come around the corner, it looked like a great big wolf. And like I said, I thought, well, that's a weird looking dog. And it was just, of course, it's raining. I mean, it was sheets. And so I couldn't tell if it was fluffy. It was dark colored. Its eyes didn't glow when it looked at me, that type of thing. But it looked like a great big wolf. I've seen coyotes. I've seen wolves. I've seen great big dogs. This was not any of those things. It was something else. And the legs, I really wasn't looking at its legs, truthfully. I just know it stood up.
Was it one of the ones where they say it's very muscular, but also on the thinner side?
No, this thing looked like it was going for a Mr. Universe contest. It was. Have you seen those the only thing I could see, those pit bull mixes that are just ripped?
Yeah.
And you're going, man, what does that dog do?
Right.
You know, that's
or
what
that buff kangaroo in Australia. You ever see that guy?
Yeah, I've seen that one. But it was, and it's, when it comes up, I thought it had paws on the front. It comes up and it's got claws. They're separated fingers. It's not a paw on the front.
How tall was it when it stood up, if you could guess?
Oh, it was probably, I'd say it was probably between 7.5, 8 foot tall.
Oh, no, hell no.
It's the top of its head is at the top of this building. It's this convenience store. It just walked around. It stands up, and it could have grabbed on the top of the roof and climbed up there if it wanted to.
Did it have a tail?
I don't remember.
Is that the only one of those that you've seen?
I don't know if I don't remember it or I didn't see it.
Right.
Yes, it's the only one of those I've ever seen.
Are you happy about that?
And yes and no.
I mean, you wouldn't want to see that thing in your backyard, tonight when you go out, right? I mean, that would suck kind of bad.
Well, no. And that's the thing. There's a part of the very human side of me goes, no, I don't want to see it. But there's a part of me that goes, I want to fight it.
Okay,
I'm gonna go get my hammer and beat its brains in just because it's there.
But it's in my territory. You just picked up on exactly my next question, which is, it's a very far out question. But if it, like you said, I want to go fight it. Well, do you think that, that total hypothetical crazy question. You go out tonight, there's a dog man in your backyard, right? Do you think that would automatically, and he's coming at you, would that automatically, unlock the potential for you to then change so that you could fight? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a crazy question. Like, totally out of a movie, but...
That's not a crazy question, because I actually think the answer to that is yes. Mainly because that type of thing happens when I need it. And that's one of the things I've said earlier, that my magic tends to happen when I need it to, or when emotions are high. That's one reason I think a lot of times magic is tied into your emotions.
Right.
And that's one reason I have a different view on it than the Eastern mysticism, where they want to, calm everything down and be one with everything. And I'm like, no, I want to be hyped up. I want to let the adrenaline flow, and just. I mean,
that's pretty cool. I mean, but I mean, you've heard me say it too. Like the whole dogman thing to me is tough versus the Bigfoot subject, and they're always in a pissy mood, and they're always seeming to not give a crap who sees them and how many see them and for how long they see them. But in your case, and like you said, you don't hear it often, you kind of said, hey, I'm here, and go ahead, come at me, bro. And then he finally was like, okay, never mind, I'll just go back this way. Did any of that, now obviously, the whole point of the story was there was a freaking hurricane going on outside, so I suppose you went inside, nobody was like, what was that weird roar? Because they couldn't hear that probably, right?
Yeah, that was, I really think if I'd have been 5 feet further away, I probably wouldn't have heard it. I probably would have seen it.
Right. Do you feel pretty lucky, though, that you saw it?
Well, yeah, that's to me. Well, at the time, I didn't. At the time, it was just that was really weird and scary, and I don't want to do that again. You know, it was like going on the roller coaster, and you're like, no, I'm not getting back on. And now, this long after it, I think I could ride that roller coaster again. You know, but like I said, unfortunately, that's just one of the many weird things. It's just one more weird thing in the box, and one more weird thing in the box doesn't make much more difference.
Right.
And I hate to be blasé about that, but it just, at the time, it really was just one more weird thing. And a lot of that times, I didn't start thinking about a lot of that stuff until after that point.
I mean, how much longer were you at that job site after that sighting?
We were done that night.
Oh, that was fortuitous then.
Left the city. Yeah, and that was that job. I traveled all over the country, and it really was. You were there for 1 or 2 nights. I think the longest we stayed in one place on the job was a week.
Now, cryptids is one of the things that you listed. Was there any other cryptid experiences that you could share before we wrap this first session up, or was that kind of like, I mean, that's a huge one. Don't get me wrong. If that's it, it's not a bummer. But were there other experiences for you?
No, that's it. I mean, unless you count you can't count the vampire and werewolf stuff in cryptid. But no, that's the only thing anomalous animal-wise I have ever...
Well, I would say that's a very full sighting and very shocking. No, I mean, unless you count the guy, if he ever had the chance to turn fully, Like, I wonder how that works. If you're this shapeshifter and you change into the beast, how would you then get stuck in that mode? You stay in that mode too long, or you're enjoying yourself too much and you just forget that you were a person to begin with? Do you know how that works?
Well, and of course, this is stories. Some of the old stories is you do it too much. You stay in too long. Mm-hmm. There's a story about a wizard telling his son that, don't do this too much. And the son eventually enjoys it, and that's the story about him turning into a bear. He enjoys it too much. He's running around, and eventually he forgets he's a person and goes in fairy tale style kills his dad.
Right.
But I think it's a mix of a lot of that you let it happen. You let too much of the animalistic nature out. And I think it takes a strong personality to overcome that. I'm not going to use the word will, because that's psychological wise, that's a no word now. Right. They don't even think that there is such a thing as will. A lot of psychologists don't think that now, but it's a strong personality that you have to have things you want to come back to. And let's face it, for a night or two running around in the woods would be fun, but I mean, it's the bomb to be human. I've got thumbs.
Right. You get to cook your food. I mean, and you choose to. Yeah, it's nice. You can get Pringles out of a can without having to just pop the whole can all over the place.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It is. I mean, thumbs are awesome.
I mean, do you think that talking about this stuff is going to have anything weird ramp up, or is it not really work like that for you because you just have so much going on anyway?
Well, see, in general, no, but I think there's this feeling in me that I'm breaking rules telling you this stuff. Mm. And it kind of goes back to dude saying, hey, dude, don't talk about this.
Yeah.
There may be an organization out there. The U.S. government may show up and, at my house tomorrow, or after you air this,
And you think that is probably specifically in relation to the shapeshifter stuff, maybe? Because they would think that, right, that, I mean, they would know that that's real and that we need to keep that tamped down.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm actually, there's been debate going back and forth in my own head, going, do I say this? Do I just go with the stories? Or do I go, I buried the lead. I'm actually a shapeshifter,
No, and I appreciate you sharing this because I'm really wondering, once this does air, people, for the most part, are quite good about getting in touch, whether or not they want to stay anonymous or come on the show, whatever's up to them. But is that something where you want to hear about the correspondence that might be coming in for this stuff? Especially specifically, guys, if you're like, actually, I kind of have that maybe going on too. That would be pretty incredible to hear from another person, because I don't think I've quite had anything like this on the show at all, actually. Is someone that comes on and says what you've said so far. So I'm very interested to get any correspondence from anybody out there.
Oh yeah, I'd be way interested in that. There's not a word big enough to tell you how interested in that I would be.
Okay, good. Yeah, me too.
And I don't know if it was you. I don't know if it was you, or if it was one of the other podcasts, because I listened to all kinds of this stuff that talked about their boyfriend was breaking up with them, and they saw his face shift, or something like that, and they were out on their apartment, and you saw that.
Oh,
and
yeah, I think that was me. I do not remember which episode that was, as
I'm
per
sorry,
usual.
Really
sorry.
That, and I think that happened in New Orleans or something too. There is a big community of werewolves in New Orleans.
Actually, I think I do know which one that is. That is Chad and Alta Dillard. I think that was their episode. And it was, I believe so. I could be wrong. I've heard so many stories, sometimes they run together, but it's in relation to their alien abduction, but they, at the same time, had run into some, basically, shapeshifters in New Orleans. Yes, absolutely.
Do you have time for one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this was what I was talking about shadow people. When I first heard about shadow people, I got really excited and went, oh yeah, okay, I see that too. And then they're describing it and go, wait, that's not what I see. And I've never had, this was the thing I was so excited to get onto your show and talk about.
Oh yeah, then please do. Yeah, no, take your time, go ahead.
I've never heard anybody else say anything, and I'd be interested if anybody else has this experience. From the time as far back as I can remember, truthfully, I see every once in a while, I will see at night shadows superimposed over whatever is there. And it's people. People moving around doing things. I don't hear anything. It's multiple people. And it's like you're looking at the backdrop of a shadow puppet play.
Mm-hmm.
Except there's no light shining. It's just shadows. And at some point, and I don't remember exactly what age this started happening, but at some point, I started noticing, none of these people ever notice me, never act like I'm there, until this thing started appearing every once in a while. It's not there all the time. If it was there all the time, I'd probably think this all was just hallucination, but it's not there every time. And what it looks like, the bulldog from the Tom and Jerry shows,
mm-hmm.
and how he walks and everything, and his great big front shoulders and arms, front legs, and then goes back to little bitty hips and little legs.
Right.
And you can't really see, if he was in silhouette, you couldn't see his head because it was all just part of his shoulders. This is the silhouette that I see, and it notices me, and it runs at me. And usually it happens when I'm outside, and I run inside. I'm like, no, I'm out. That's weird. even for me, that's weird. And I don't know what would happen if I let it catch me. I don't know. I don't think I want to know. But I see this thing, and it's probably, oh goodness, it's probably the size of a gorilla. It's not shaped like a gorilla. It's huge. But and it's great big old muscular, the silhouette of great big muscular front legs and little bitty sloping back to little bitty hips and little legs. And the reason I know what its back legs look like is I've seen it in silhouette sideways, and then it turns, and you get the from it
because it notices you. Oh my God!
It acts like it notices me, and there's this. I've always had this thing in the back of my head, and I think it may be tied to this thing, but it may be tied to something else. Who knows? I've got so many other things. I always get this feeling that if there's something behind me, and if I turn around, it's going to get me. As long as I ignore it, don't acknowledge it's there, and that's in the fairy stuff too.
Right.
The unspoken rules about not turning around when you're running from something. Walking across the bridges and things like that. And then I get inside my house, which is warded, fully warded with everything I could do. I get inside and I'm fine. It just stops. And
it stops, and it walks away, or it just disappears?
No, I just don't see it anymore. Of course, I don't turn around and look back at it either. The feeling of it chasing me is gone. As soon as I step into my sunroom, it's gone. Once I get through the threshold, it's gone.
What does its head look like?
I can't make out it. It's just all shoulders.
Yeah.
It's.
I'm picturing like the beast from Ghostbusters almost, without having the dog ears and stuff.
Well, no, it's stockier than that, and it's shaped. The legs are disproportional. I don't know how this damn thing runs.
So that is how big the front is compared to the back. Like, it's got skinny little back legs, and it tapers way off, like you said.
Yeah, it tapers way off.
The hell is it?
I don't know. I don't know. I've never seen. The only thing, like I said, the only thing is the cartoon bulldogs from the old 30s and 40s cartoons that has that same type of silhouette where it's really big front legs and really little back legs.
How many times have you seen that thing?
Oh, lots of times. I can't.
Where have you seen
It's one of those everywhere. Just anywhere. And usually, like I said, it's outside. I've seen the silhouetted people. I see them inside every once in a while. And usually it happens when it's dark. I've had it happen when it was light inside every once in a while. Used to see it in the house I lived in, or I live in now, but I don't anymore because I think partly because I've warded the place. So whatever that is leaking through.
So you've never seen that hideous gorilla bulldog thing in the house, in any inside building?
No, it's always been outside when that happens.
I guess thank God for that. Is it always chasing you? So is it always doing its own thing, and then there you are, and it does the turn, and then it runs?
No. Every once in a while, I will see it first, and I'll be able to get inside before it sees me. That hasn't always. It doesn't. Like I said, it doesn't always. It's not always there, and it wasn't there when I was younger. This probably happened when started happening when I was a teenager.
That's actually kind of interesting. That makes it all the more real, probably, to you. The fact that it's not always making the same motions. It's not always doing the same thing, and you can actually avoid its gaze and it running after you. That's
and
pretty incredible.
Like I said, I don't know how it's noticing me, what senses it's using. Of course, being a silhouette, I don't see no eyes.
Right.
Right. I don't know if it's smell me, or if I'm leaking, my energy aura,
You're
whatever,
leaking. Yeah, it's your leaking that we were talking about earlier. Do you think if another person, or maybe there was somebody, would someone else be able to see this thing? Or they would look at you like you're nuts because you're just running all of a sudden inside your house?
I don't know. That is one of those things that I've never seen that when somebody is around. And like I said, that's one of the reasons why I would love to hear of, oh yeah, I see that type of thing too. Because, I always called them shadow people. I see shadow people. And then when the podcasts start talking about shadow people, it's stuff like the Hat Man.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff, it's people standing in the hallway, or seeing figures walk somewhere. This is like I'm standing in.
Yeah, how do you label it?
Yeah, it's still shadow people.
Right.
I mean, but it's not doing the things that shadow people do in the stories that I've heard.
Man, that's okay. So that's twice in one show now. You've brought things up that I've never quite heard of before. I love it. See, but it's got to be attached to the shadow people, the same ones that I've seen in the woods, somehow. But I've never quite heard. Now we've all heard of shadow cats or shadow dogs, or but that is a first. And gorilla-sized, and to look like, I can see the bulldog that you're talking about, by the way. Maybe I can find an image and put that in show notes for people to gaze at if they're not familiar with that cartoon. But I don't think I've ever heard anything quite like that.
Like I said, all of the podcasts and radio shows that I've been listening to podcasts like this for probably about 8 years now.
And you haven't come across anything?
Haven't come across anything. I went through your show in probably about 3 months.
Wow. Well, thanks.
Well, I get to the end of I'm playing on Spotify, and I get to the end of it, and I'm trying to swipe to the next one, and it won't do it. And I went out and looked and went, oh, I'm all the way to the front. Okay.
That's awesome. Thanks. Do you think that, not that you'd want to do this, but considering, the magic that you talked about and some of the abilities that you have, do you think that you would be able to go out and call that thing into existence to where, you could actually see it and interact with it? Not that you'd want to, I'm just saying.
I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm not sure, like you said, I'm not sure I want to.
Oh, hell no, you wouldn't. No.
Well, and that one reason I really think that scares me is because that's one of the earlier things that happened to me.
Right.
Is the shadow people.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think the voices and hearing the voices, the crowded room voices, and those shadow people are tied together. I think it's leaking somehow, another dimension, a piece of a timeline, some type of time slip. That's my theory on it, but I don't know. I don't know if it's just, it could be my brain misfiring. Especially if you don't hear back from anybody. I'm just nuts.
Oh no, I always get correspondence, and there will be. So I am very, very interested to hear anything from anybody on what we've been talking about. And I will, of course, pass on any correspondence to you, Roy. Okay,
that's great.
Did it go well enough that you'd want to come back on and finish the rest of your stories?
I have so many more.
I know. We got to cover them. Because you've already given me 2 wonderful golden nuggets today that I am so excited to hear. And I really hope that we do some feedback from folks about. So, in fact,
if the government shows up, it's something.
Oh, shit, don't say that. If you start messaging me... yeah, it is. And how many times have I said that? You've heard me go, I'm not doing my job. I'm not getting followed by black Lincolns, with tinted windows or men in suits. I'm not doing enough. That would be a wonderful confirmation. I always joke about that, but.
And that's one of those with me. Do you go with them or do you fight them?
Right? Are you going to give me all the answers to all the questions that I want to know?
Yeah. I'm like, well, I could always escape from the government facility afterwards, you know.
Well, yeah, because,
No.
I mean, obviously, all you have to do is tap into the other side, and they're not going to be able to contain you, buddy. You're like, screw this, I'm out, huh?
Electronic locks aren't going to work. I mean, you just...
No, I really appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about that stuff. Specifically, of course, the shape-shifting aspect of things, because we do hear people talking about that, but not quite like this. So I thank you a lot for that.
Yeah. I've never heard anybody come out and go, you know, I've heard a few people go, I'm a dragon lord or something, you know,
right.
Some crazy stuff on Coast to Coast. And you're talking to that guy and you go, no, that dude's crazy. Because he can't string a sentence together. That dude's crazy. But mine, I've always told people, I mean, I'm not trying to change anybody's mind about stuff. I know it's real to me, and either at some point I'm going to find out I'm right or I'm crazy. So either way, it's something, you know.
Well, I don't think you're crazy. I mean, look at the stuff that's come on into the fray, and like you said, Darkness Radio and Dark Waters and Coast to Coast. And granted, there are some people that may, in fact, have a few things maybe rattling around a little loose upstairs, but I mean, for the most part, we're pretty normal folks that run across extraordinary things or have extraordinary abilities like you do. So,
yeah. Who among the human race doesn't have a few screws loose?
Oh, we all do. Yeah. I think
same person would scare me. You know.
And I think after everything that's going on now, it's like we're really seeing people lose their shit. So it's kind of, yeah. I mean, if it's not too painful, maybe we could even jump on in a couple days or a few days if you want to. I mean, that'll be before even this airs, but I don't know if you want to do such a thing, or we could wait till next week. It's totally up to you.
It doesn't. Like I said, I have probably for the next month, I have nothing else planned.
Right, I know, me neither. That's I'm like, I'm gonna just record as much as I can and talk to people and try to turn this into a positive and not lose touch with folks. And so, no, that would be awesome. If you're willing to do that, we could just hop right back on in a few days. That would be amazing.
I think I was worried, you know, what if I don't have enough stuff? What if I don't remember my stuff?
No,
and then I'm like, and then I have a tendency to ramble, and I know we jumped around so much. There's going to be people mad, like, wait a minute, you were talking about this, and then you switched this thing.
Well, yes, but that comes down to the fact that a lot of these things tie in together, right? So sometimes the jumping around is necessary. Yeah,
a lot of that stuff, and it's just so much stuff is interconnected anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that it's all in separate little boxes anymore. And, you know, I used to think that Bigfoot was in this box and aliens was in this box and ghosts were in this box. And now I'm kind of going, I don't think it's in separate boxes.
Yeah. I know the longer I do this, the more I'm starting to think that too. So, and we're not crazy for thinking that. It's just kind of where the data seems to be going. So, not that we're saying Bigfoot is an alien or anything like that. Don't jump to that conclusion, everyone, just because we said that. But there are things that join together when you start talking about any and all of these subjects. There's always something that touches the other. So, well, Roy, thanks again. You take care out there. Don't get, lost in the shuffle of trying to get ass paper or any of that stuff. And I will be in touch, of course, very soon so we can record our second session.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Have a good night.
Roy. You too.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little file. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. And then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. When you settle down in the train to read your newspaper, and so on. You are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.